Cyberpunk Edgerunners is a goddamn masterpiece, and that's no hyperbole. It is genuinely one of the best anime I've seen this year, and one of my personal favorite anime of all time now. And honestly, it came out of flipping nowhere. I had never even heard about it until I opened up Netflix one day and saw it was occupying the top spot on its charts. But even still, through word of mouth and overwhelmingly positive reviews, it's becoming the common consensus that it is an amazing show. So I want to take the time to spread that message a bit more, and also to talk about what makes it so special. First off, I don't think anyone can deny that it looks amazing. The visual flair and fluid action throughout the show are one of the first things everyone notices when they start the series. Heck, the first episode even opens with an all-out brawl between a cyber-enhanced lunatic and the police force of the city. And right off the bat, you can see where the hype is coming from. The atmosphere is nailed perfectly, with the tall looming buildings covered top to bottom in neon signs, and the nighttime of the city contributing to the ominous vibe. And even when the fight starts and the bullets start flying, you can clearly tell what's going on due to the distinct color of the bullets contrasting with the serene darkness of the background. Even though the fights are freaking insane, they still maintain a modicum of realism, which makes you take things seriously and get really invested in what's going on. If you didn't already know, this show is produced by Studio Trigger, famous for their works on stuff like Kill la Kill and Promare. Without going too much in depth on either of those two works, I'll just say both of them feel very much like Studio Trigger series. They always maintain a level of insanity in their productions, a certain art style that makes them very distinct. And while that art style can also be found in Cyberpunk Edgerunners, the insanity side of things is toned down a lot. While there is still some insane fights and some crazy stuff which happens, none of it feels too out there and confusing for me to be taken out of the story or to stop sympathizing with these characters. All the emotional moments are highlighted rather than buried by the animation, which makes the story feel a lot more visceral and real to me. And I'll talk about the story in a second, so just hold on for a moment. As you can probably tell, the animation was a huge highlight for me, and many of the others who watched this show. But honestly, for every single aspect of the show, the production quality was equally top tier. The whole 10-episode show felt like a movie at every turn, with each scene being labored over intensely. The directorial flair with a lot of this series is incredible. Many scenes are shown to you out of order, which may be a bit confusing at first, but the writing and animation keep you engaged until the full picture of the story is revealed. The whole thing feels a lot more out there than any other show I've seen. A lot of the shots are done in a really interesting and unique way, which I think pays dividends at the end. And to add to that, the soundtrack is killer as well. So many of these songs instantly grabbed my attention and complemented the scenes they were over as well. I have to say there were some moments where the songs kind of distracted me from what was going on, and some of the mixing felt a bit weird at times, but overall, every single aspect of this production felt polished and fresh. But all of this is worthless without a good plot to carry us through it, and I'm being serious when I say that the story of this series lives up to the standards of the animation in every single way. First off, to address the elephant in the room, this is an anime based off of the game Cyberpunk 2077, which I'm sure a lot of you would have heard of, but maybe not for the best reasons. But despite this, you don't really need to know anything about the games to watch this show. Even though the show is technically canon within the world of Cyberpunk 2077, no outside information is needed to enjoy this anime. It may heighten the experience, which I wouldn't know since I've literally never touched Cyberpunk, but it definitely isn't necessary. So through the whole run of this show, light spoilers ahead by the way, we are following David Martinez, a child born to a lower class family who seems to be in his late teenage years. Despite his mother and him being pretty strapped for cash, David's mom insists on sending him to a high-class school operated by Arasaka, a large corporation that is famous throughout Night City, the city that the two of them live in. Her dream is for David to be able to rise through the corporate ranks and become a leader in Arasaka, but David and everyone else around him seems to think that that goal is unattainable. Anyway, soon into the story, a tragedy occurs and David is left in a very tough situation, resenting the people that always bully him and the society that constantly oppresses him. In Night City, almost everyone has what they call chrome, or cybernetic implants, that serve as robotic attachments to one's body which can enhance any part of you. These come in many different forms, as utilitarian items that can help on your day-to-day, as things just used for the sake of being used, or more importantly for our story, as equipment to be used in fights. David's mother, through some circumstances, had come under possession of a Sandevistan, an artificial spine which is considered military-grade equipment. While David has never had the money to be able to enhance himself before, in his depressed stupor he goes to a nearby doctor and asks to have the Sandevistan equipped to him. However, with extremely powerful equipment comes equally as much risk, as the higher the quality and quantity of enhanced body parts, the more you can start to fall into cyberpsychosis, which is a condition which causes you to go insane and start killing everyone around you, that comes about as a result of over-reliance on cybernetic parts. But despite his lack of experience with the robotics and the insane power of the Sandevistan, David goes through with the modding. After this, David's life goes completely to shit. He's picked up by a gang of edgerunners, people who push themselves to the limit to survive in this cutthroat world. While at the same time, he's selected as a target by Arasaka for his ability to utilize the time-morphing Sandevistan. Because of this, his life is anything but peaceful till the end of the series. The world of Cyberpunk Edgerunners is one of my favorite parts of the series. I've always had a soft spot for hyper-futuristic cities covered in neon lights, and this scenery is prevalent everywhere you look in Night City. The seeming utopia of the posh area of the city, the area where Arasaka Academy is contrasted perfectly with the dank and grimy vibe of the underbelly of the city. Every single shot that just shows us the light and dark side of this world is golden and makes us so much more enthralled in the world. And speaking of the world, that brings us to one of the most amazing parts of this story, the silent world building and storytelling. There's so many subtle details that are thrown at the watcher, and so many of them only come to make sense by the end of the series when you understand everything. So many aspects of the story and world are either explained very roughly or not at all, but instead of coming off as confusing, this makes the whole story seem more naturalized. There isn't anyone here to hold our hand as we go through this insane and dystopian city, just like how there's no one to hold David's hand in this world either. But despite that, the story is told in a way for us to be able to pick up information easily. For an example of this, look at MaxTac. They are a specialized surface designed for hunting down people that go crazy as a result of getting too many cyberware implants, aka people who are already diagnosed with cyberpsychosis. These people are never properly explained to us. No character sits down with the audience and tells us this is what MaxTac is for, and this is what it's capable of. But even still, just from a few minutes of the opening where we watch a cyberpsycho get apprehended, we already clearly understand how capable they are and their role in the world that they're set in. And the same holds true for Trauma Team, which is the medical service provider of Night City. They're shown in their first introduction flying towards a building that is currently on fire, telling us along with the Red Cross on their side that this organization is probably responsible for disaster prevention and medical aid. But again, this isn't explained to us verbally. And again later in the story, when David's mom is injured and Trauma Team comes to help, when they realize she isn't a paying customer of theirs, they immediately leave her. While this is a detail that is delivered verbally, this one exchange explains so much about the city right off the bat. Even these people who are supposed to be trying to save others value their customers more based on how much money they are receiving, even going as far as to disregard somebody possibly in danger because they aren't somebody who's contributed money to them. This not only shows how corrupt Trauma Team is, but it also hints at how corrupt the entire city is to allow this to go on without end. It also shows how terrible a place the city must be for these workers to look at an injured person and leave them without as much as a second thought. And that's one of the key strengths of the story. Everything fits, everything builds together. The setting, the organizations that exist within it, and the characters that live or die by these organizations' hands. It all comes across naturally. The world is built up so fast, with you feeling like you have an understanding of the city already just by the first episode. And every episode past it builds even further than that. To add to this natural style of world building, one small detail I love is the lingo and slang of all the characters within Night City. Everyone we see in the story uses language unfamiliar to us. Chrome, eddies, choom. These terms get thrown around as regular parts of each character's diction, and there's never once explained to us properly. It's left to the audience to make connections as to what these mean on our own. And that's just so smart. If there's one thing I hate about a lot of stories, it's when they try to talk down to their audience and kind of neuter the story in ways to make it more understandable, but in doing so they completely break down the suspension of disbelief in the world. This is why there's so many stories with protagonists that are fish out of water, where they have no idea what's going on around them and they have to get things explained to them constantly, because through this, the audience can understand what's going on too. And while I understand why this is done, it's still very refreshing to have a story that avoids that whole mess. Because, yeah, that just makes sense. Somebody's been living in the city their entire life and interacting with those in it, would of course know the slang used by the people in this world. Just like how you rarely see those familiar with technology and messaging asking what BRB stands for. No one in this world is going to sit down and ask for a long-winded explanation on what these words mean. And the amazing thing is, all of these terms get defined to us anyway, but it happens in a way that makes sense, not as like an exposition dump, but just naturally through the act of us experiencing the story. We learn what chrome is due to people constantly referring to the cybernetic parts as chrome and using phrases such as getting chromed out. We learn what eddies are by the references to money in this world by that name, similar to how people in America call dollars bucks. We hear people referred to as choom left, right, and center, and we learn to assume that it's a term of endearment that is used within the tightly knit gang that David becomes a part of. Small stuff like this is what makes a story stand out to me, just the little things that didn't need to be addressed but make me so much happier when they are. Somebody can go through the entire series never once knowing what the slang means, and they probably lose very little of the enjoyment, but the fact that the show took that risk of possibly having the audience get confused means a lot to me. But finally, without beating around the bush anymore, let's talk about these characters, shall we? So this story is small scale. It's nothing grand like saving the world from destruction or even saving all of Night City. Instead of something grandiose and fake like that, Cyberpunk Edgerunners goes with a human route of just making a story about people. People who feel real, people who just want nothing but to survive in this harsh world that they've been thrust into, and people who have goals and dreams but don't have the ability to go after them. David is somebody who doesn't have a place in the brightly lit top side of Night City. His one connection with the surface, his mom, left him to fend for himself, and as soon as he equips the Sand of Easton, he starts down a long and destructive path to ensure his own survival. David is somebody with a big heart. He is somebody too pure for the dark life that finds him, and everyone around him knows it. He's constantly told by those around him to never trust anyone, and even though that statement is proved true time and time again, he still goes back, unable to kill the kindness instilled within him. The trope of somebody being far too bright for the dark life they've chosen is a common one, but you can't deny its effectiveness. It's heartbreaking to watch David's transformation through the series, from somebody free of all the burdens of lower society, to a broken man with a guilty conscience and a heavy heart. David is somebody you always want to root for, somebody you want to see succeed in the end, and even though he may make bad decisions on occasion, it never feels fake or irritating. He is always just human. And that's the amazing thing. Even under all of the chrome implants and metal organs that these characters have integrated into themselves, they all still feel human. Lucy is David's first companion who he has a run-in with after she tries to pickpocket him. The two decide to become partners in crime and pickpocket more of the stuffy elite of Night City. Lucy is cynical and seems all too familiar with the seedy side of the city. But when David gets to know her, he finds out that she has a soft side to her as well. On top of having a stellar character design, Lucy has a dream. Despite her generally dark outlook on life, due in most part to the tragic backstory she calls her own, she idolizes the idea of going to the moon. The concept of breaking out of the city which restrains her and going out into the liberating emptiness that is space is what drives her to do everything that she does. Her dream is what drives and motivates her to act the way she does in the story, and it's the same for everyone else. There are no caricatures in this story. Even side characters always act in a realistic, albeit self-serving way, which makes the whole world feel whole and occupied. Spoiler alert, but there's a lot of deaths in this story, like a lot of deaths, to the point where it's almost impossible to predict who will make it out of the story alive. But the deaths don't seem edgily tacked on in service of making the narrative artificially darker. They all feel like they were adequately built up to and executed, and in fact only serve to enhance the feeling of dread constantly building throughout the story. If there's one thing I hate, it's characters being killed off and then being brought back to life like right away, thus rendering their deaths completely useless, but luckily, although there are multiple chances for that to happen here, it fortunately never does. I hope. If there's a season 2, then we'll just have to see, but I'm really praying not. Anyways, I think I've rambled on for long enough. Hopefully my long spiel was enough to convince you that this series is worth a shot, and if it wasn't, hopefully the gorgeous background footage for this video was. I really enjoyed Cyberpunk Edgerunners and kinda want to make a spoilery video on it in the future, so let me know if you'd be interested in something like that, cause honestly, I'm just excited to talk about these characters and this world some more. Hey guys, hope you enjoyed. If you're interested in seeing me talk more about the series, please consider subscribing. I've been getting a lot of subscribers recently, and it's been really nice because I put a lot of work into these videos, but anyways, I digress. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye!